Do you know what the most painful thing in life is? It is not when outsiders betray you. It is when the very child you raised with your whole life sends you a message colder than the wind over Lake Erie. Old man, we flew to Iceland already. Don't bother us anymore. I stood in the middle of the Thanksgiving table, where my wife and I had placed 3 plates for 30 years, looking at the cold turkey, the half-burned candles, and I understood that some children do not grow up on love. They grow up on contempt. But if you think I collapsed, you are wrong, because they did not know that right after that message appeared. I opened a door the 2 of them never expected, the door leading to the day their own game would end. Before we begin this stormy journey, if you are listening from any city, leave the name of where you live, so I know how many homes this road to justice is reaching. And if you value the effort of the elderly standing up to protect themselves, leave a dot. It is small, but it is a reminder that there are still people who understand. Gratitude is the only foundation that keeps a family from collapsing. Now then, we begin. That Thanksgiving, Cleveland was colder than usual. The snow had not fallen yet, but the wind from Lake Erie blowing through the old brick rows of houses was still sharp enough to slip through sweaters and sting the bones. I woke up at 5 in the morning as if my body still remembered the rhythm from the days Angela was alive. Every holiday she would jump out of bed before sunrise, turn on the radio, and move around the kitchen while listening to music. The radio was still there on the wooden shelf by the kitchen, but for 2 years I had not turned it on. This morning I only heard the kettle whistling and the knife touching the cutting board in the 3-story Victorian house, far too big for one 63-year-old man. I started with the turkey. 20 pounds of frozen meat lay on the steel tray, waiting for my hands to do what only Angela used to do. Rinse the cavity, stuffing in sprigs of rosemary, thyme, sage leaves, rubbing the outside with butter, salt, pepper, and a little paprika for color. I worked slowly, carefully, as if Angela were standing behind me, nodding. "That's good, Ray." At 8, I called Melissa. She'd picked up on the 3rd ring. "Hello, Dad." Her voice came through the speaker with faint pop music and keyboard tapping in the background, probably at her real estate office. "Just checking again, 6 tonight, right?" I asked while opening the fridge to check the trays of potatoes, green beans, and pumpkin pie ingredients already prepared. "Yes, Dad. Tonight for sure. Travis and I will be there at 6. She spoke fast, the usual rushed tone. "I'll bring a bottle of white wine. Travis likes that kind." I paused for a second. That name was always with her, like a long shadow. "All right. I'll have glasses ready." "I have a client meeting, Dad. See you tonight. Love you." "Love you." The call ended, the screen returning to the wallpaper of Angela smiling under the red autumn leaves at Rocky River Park. I set the phone down and went back to cooking. Around 10, the turkey went into the oven. The smell of hot butter and herbs began to spread, clinging to the curtains, to the kitchen towels, to the wrinkles on my hands. I boiled the potatoes, mashed them with butter, cream, and a little garlic. I made cranberry sauce from fresh berries instead of using canned ones. Angela was always insistent about that. She used to say, "It's depressing to eat from a can on a holiday." Around noon, I opened the glass cabinet in the dining room where Angela kept our wedding china. Thin navy borders, a tiny wreath in the center, old-fashioned and a bit outdated. But to me, it was always the most beautiful set in the world. I took each piece out, washed them by hand, even though I knew there wasn't a speck of dust on them, then dried them with a white cloth. 3 large plates, 3 sets of silverware, 3 glasses, 1 for me, 1 for Melissa, 1 for Travis. Angela's seat was still there, on my right, but I didn't set a plate. I only placed a small glass upside down, like the way churches mark a seat for someone who has passed. By 5:45, the table was ready. The turkey glistened with fat, its skin golden, resting in the center surrounded by the mashed potatoes, the tray of green beans sautéed with fried shallots, the bowl of deep red cranberry sauce in the glass dish Angela once bought at a thrift market. I changed into a clean shirt, tucked in the handkerchief she used to pick for me whenever it's a special occasion, then stood by the living room window, looking out onto Tremont Street, quiet and nearly empty. The streetlights were pale yellow. A few houses across the street had flickering lights behind their curtains, and the smell of burning wood lingered in the air. 6 o'clock, nothing unusual. People in Cleveland were used to being 5 or 10 minutes late. 6:10, 6:20. I poured myself a cup of hot tea and set it at my spot. The pendulum clock in the hallway ticked steadily, counting each minute. 6:30. I picked up my phone, opened the messages, typed a line. "I'm waiting. Where are you two?" I erased it, typed again more gently. "Honey, is traffic bad? I'm just asking so I can warm the food at the right time." I hit send. Delivered appeared, and that was it. I returned to the dining table, lifted the silver cover, and saw the turkey beginning to cool, the surface of the gravy tightening into a thin skin. 7 o'clock. The chairs were still empty. I sat down, back straight, hands on the table. 7:15. The phone on the table buzzed once, its screen glowing blue. Melissa. I didn't have time to think much. I pulled the phone closer and opened the message. One line appeared, no punctuation, quick, cold, and cruel enough that I had to read it 3 times. "Old man, we flew to Iceland already. Don't bother us anymore." For the first few seconds, I thought maybe my daughter was joking. She used to send memes, used to tease me for being old-fashioned. But the way she called me, old man, wasn't playful. It was the way Travis spoke whenever he thought I couldn't hear, and I had heard it more than once through a half-closed door. "That old man is rich but easy to manipulate." I stared at the message for a long time. The fat on the turkey had solidified into a cloudy white layer. The cranberry sauce in the bowl had begun to thicken, its surface drying. The candles on the table had burned halfway down, wax dripping along the brass holders Angela used to polish before every gathering. The entire room suddenly felt so silent that I could hear the fireplace crackling from the temperature change. The front window rattled slightly. I saw someone's shadow on the porch, a soft knock on the door. I stood up, walked down the hallway, and opened the front door. Mrs. Harriet, the neighbor who had lived on this street with us for nearly 20 years, stood there with a wool shawl wrapped around her, her breath turning into white mist in the cold air. "Raymond, I saw your light still on. I just thought I'd bring over some leftover pumpkin pie." Her eyes flicked past my shoulder into the dining room behind me, the table still fully set, the empty chairs, the dishes sitting untouched like a photograph. I saw the moment her eyes landed on Melissa's chair, the empty glass for Travis. The silence between us was heavier than the wind outside. "It looks beautiful," she said softly, as if speaking too loudly might break something fragile. "They haven't arrived?" I tried to keep my lips from trembling. Probably their ride is running late." I smiled, feeling as if I were wearing a wooden mask. "Thank you for the pie, Harriet. I'll bring you some turkey tomorrow." She looked at me, clearly knowing this wasn't the whole story. But old people like us learn to respect the thin curtain that hides each other's pain. "If you need anything, call me." "I'm fine." I closed the door before my eyes could get wet. My back leaned against the wooden panel, my hand still holding the tray of pumpkin pie Harriet had given me. From the dining room, the candlelight flickered faintly, casting the shadows of 2 empty chairs on the wooden floor. I went back to the table, sat down again. No one came, no one replied, except for that one message. I opened my phone again, scrolling through the old messages with Melissa. The earlier lines came up. "Dad, I need you to sign this. It's just formal. The lawyer said it makes things easier." That was 2 years ago, when I had just gone through a heart test and had to stay in the hospital for a week. Melissa handed me a thick stack of papers and said, "Dad, sign it, so if anything urgent happens, I can handle things for you." I was tired, dizzy, and I trusted my daughter. That was the power of attorney. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing, giving my only child the authority to make decisions if I ever became unable to think clearly. I never imagined that document would become a knife that could turn back toward me. I set my phone down, pushed the chair back, and stood up. I was no longer hungry, not because the smell of food made me sick, but because something in my chest had gone out, leaving behind a cold, hollow space. I walked into my office, the room Angela always called the cave of the old prosecutor. The dark wooden bookshelves were filled with old files, case precedents, and thank you letters colleagues brought me on the day I retired. In the corner was a beige metal file cabinet with labels Angela had written by hand in her round script. Bank, insurance, property, will. I pulled out the property drawer. The smell of old paper mixed with ink rose. On top, neatly placed as if it had always been waiting to be taken out, was a brown file folder with a metal clip, the upper left corner reading 453 Jefferson Ave, deed and title, Raymond and Angela Holt. I carried it to the desk and opened it. The deed, the transfer papers, the plot map. Angela's name was crossed out because she had passed away, leaving only my name there, bold, clear, and alone. Under the desk lamp, the words sole owner seemed to glow brighter than the other lines. This house, the house I had paid for nearly 30 years, repaired every step and repainted every wall. The house I let my daughter stay in for a few months after her husband lost his job the first time. The house she now treated like a free hotel with the added service of full-time old man caretaker. I did not cry. Strangely, the tears did not come. What rose inside me was not an explosion, but a thin, extremely solid layer of ice forming around my heart. I closed the folder and carefully put everything back. Outside, Cleveland was sinking into Thanksgiving night, and families gathered around warm dinner tables. And inside this house, there was only an old man and a pile of documents. But for the first time in many years, I did not feel like the passive one anymore. I was only just beginning. I still remember very clearly the afternoon 4 years ago, the day Melissa stood on my porch with a small suitcase and red, swollen eyes. Angela had been gone for not even 8 months, and the house was so quiet I could hear every tick of the clock fall onto the wooden floor. When I opened the door, Melissa said one sentence, so soft it felt like wind passing through. "Dad, can I stay for a few months? I just need a place to get steady again." I nodded before she even finished. My only daughter, after losing her mother, was trying to stay upright. I would never close my door to her. I helped her bring her suitcase upstairs to her old room, the one Angela had covered with photos of the two of them laughing on the Lake Erie shore. I never imagined that tiny moment would be the starting point of the longest 4 years of my life. A week later, Melissa came to the dining table, her voice hesitant. "Dad, Travis is stuck without a place to go. He's just crashing at a friend's. Can he stay here for a few days?" I looked into my daughter's eyes. The loneliness after Angela's death made Melissa cling to anything that kept her from feeling alone. And I was weak. "All right, a few days," I said. But a few days became 4 months. 4 months became 4 years. The day Travis moved in, he carried just one backpack, walked through the door, and tossed a sentence at me. "Hey, Ray." No, sir. No, Mr. Holt. Not even Mr. Anything. Just Ray. As if I were some dorm roommate from back in college. At first, I tried to overlook it. Melissa would force a smile every time Travis spoke that way, and I told myself, "Ray, don't be sensitive. He's young. He doesn't know better." But then the small things piled up until they couldn't be ignored. One evening, when I went up to the 3rd floor to find Angela's keepsake box, I heard shouting, mixed with keyboard pounding hard enough to shake the floor. "Ray, shut the door! I'm streaming!" I stood at the doorway. The 3rd floor used to be Angela's favorite place. the armchair, the round window looking over the oak tree. Now, green and red LED lights wrapped around the ceiling. 2 curved monitors are blazing. The carpet was littered with energy drink cans. The walls were covered with shooter game posters instead of Icelandic landscapes. The place Angela once called the Autumn Observatory had turned into the noisy hideout of a man who refused to grow up. I quietly walked back downstairs. Crossing the dark hallway, I remembered Angela once saying, "Ray, a house doesn't need to be big. It just needs to hold the people you love." Now I had a house, but nothing inside it felt like mine anymore. Other signs appeared slowly. So slowly I saw them and still tried to pretend I didn't. Travis opened my bank mail right in front of me. I said, "That's my mail." He responded flatly, "Oh, I thought it was important." So I opened it. Then tossed it on the table like he had the right. Melissa used the supplemental card I gave her when she first moved in, because I thought she'd only use it for groceries, but the transactions were a dinner at an Italian place over $100, an electronics store nearly $700, a PC upgrade over $1,000. I asked gently, "You charge these?" Melissa didn't look me in the eye. "I'll pay it back. We're just a little stuck right now." But Travis had been unemployed for 8 months. Melissa's income was unstable. Their stuck came from living off someone else. I began overhearing their late-night conversations. One night, when I went downstairs for water, I stopped at the top of the stairs when I heard Travis say, "This old man is easy to use. Big house, solid pension. He's not going to live that long anyway. Let's think long-term, babe." Melissa didn't argue, just silence, the most dangerous kind of silence. I walked back upstairs in the dark, not wanting to hear more. It felt like someone had erased my name from my own home. After that Thanksgiving evening and the message I never thought I would receive in my life, the house was ice cold, the smell of cold turkey mixing with the damp air from the hallway, leaving my chest empty in a way I can't describe. I stood in the dining room for a long time before putting on my coat and stepping outside. The Cleveland night was so cold it burned the lungs. I drove to a 24-hour cafe in Tremont, the rare place still lit on a holiday. I sent Jonas Reddick a message. "If you're still up, I need to meet." Jonas wasn't just a lawyer. He'd been my colleague for 12 years, the only one who still kept his spine straight in courtrooms full of pretense. He arrived in 15 minutes. Same old suit, crooked tie like I'd dragged him out of bed. Jonas sat down, looked at me for a second, and spoke directly. "Raymond, what happened?" I told him everything, every detail, including the text. "Old man, we flew to Iceland. Don't bother us." Jonas leaned back, set his coffee down, and said plainly, without sugarcoating, "Raymond, Melissa, and Travis are not tenants. No lease, no occupancy rights. They're just guests staying under your goodwill." I stayed silent. Jonas continued, "You have full authority to issue a notice to vacate. 30 days. He pulled a stack of papers from his case. "And you need to prepare yourself. People like them don't leave quietly. They may claim you're mentally unstable or exploit your age to fight for control." I asked, "What do I have to do?" Jonas leaned closer, his voice low but firm. "Record video. Take photos. Save receipts. Save messages. Keep a journal. You must prove they're occupiers, not people you're evicting without cause." I swallowed, feeling like I was preparing for a courtroom battle against my own family. That night, I recorded every corner of the house. The messy living room. The kitchen is full of Travis's takeout containers. The 3rd floor, I recorded again. The LED glow on the walls like wounds on the house. The supplemental card receipts, I photographed them all. The messages between me and Melissa, I saved everything. I opened my journal and wrote my first line in years. "Today, I begin preparing to protect this house." When I finished documenting, I sat down in the office where Angela once kept a small plant by the window. I felt like she was standing there, asking me a simple question. "Why did you let it get this far?" I didn't know how to answer. Maybe because I loved my daughter too long in the wrong way, or because I feared loneliness too openly after Angela died. That night, I emailed Jonas one sentence. "I'm ready. Let's begin." He replied 10 minutes later, "Good. It's time you reclaim what's yours." I turned off the lights. For the first time in 4 years, I felt myself standing up again. Even knowing a battle was coming, I felt lighter, because at least I wasn't letting them take one more piece of my life. I took the key to my office, opened the bottom drawer where I used to keep my old camera, and the mini camcorder Angela once used to record our Christmas baking nights, both over a dozen years old but still working. And for the first time in many years, I held them not to preserve memories, but to protect myself. I started with the reading room. The door opened to the familiar smell of oak and old paper, but mixed in was the smell of fast food, vape smoke, and the faint clicking of a mechanical keyboard somewhere. Travis had turned the place where I used to read case law and write notes for the dean into his private office. My leather chair, the one Angela gave me for my 30th career anniversary, now sat shoved against the corner, like an obstacle. On my desk were Travis's gaming laptop, a row of energy drink cans, a half-eaten pizza box, and on the floor, a bank letter addressed to Raymond Holt, torn open. I bent down, photographed the desk corner, then stepped back to film the entire room, each item a silent confession that they never saw this as my home, just a convenient location. I turned on the camera and whispered into the mic, "Reading room, November 25th. Without my consent, Travis has occupied the room for 4 years. My private mail has been opened without permission." I did not tremble. I only felt cold. I went upstairs. The master bathroom door, Angela's bathroom, was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. God. Melissa's hairdryer was plugged in on the counter, dozens of cosmetics scattered across the sink, and Angela's towels, the ones I kept for years, had been used by Melissa to wipe off makeup. I recognized it instantly because the corner had Angela's embroidered letter A. I photographed everything, then filmed a close-up of the towel and whispered, "Angela's towel, a keepsake, used without permission." I had to stop for 3 seconds just to breathe. My heart tightened in a way no words could explain. In the kitchen, I gathered all the receipts Melissa and Travis had left on the table, stacking them. An Italian restaurant bill over $120, a cosmetics bill $86, a Best Buy bill $1,200 marked GPU upgrade, 2 Uber Eats receipts $64 and $78, all charged to the supplemental card I gave Melissa for emergencies. I filmed each receipt, then opened my banking app to capture screenshots. Not to get angry, but to prove in court they were not victims. They were occupiers. I remembered the external hard drive in the drawer where Angela stored family photos, and inside it I found a folder named Housecam Backup. I'd forgotten I once installed a camera in the living room 5 years ago and took it down after Angela died, but the files remained. I opened the video from October 14th. The image was blurry, but the sound was perfectly clear. Melissa sat on the sofa while Travis stood near the staircase. The man who had lived off me for 4 years spoke with dripping contempt. "This old man is useless. He goes to sleep early every night. I swear Ray is the type who dies and doesn't even know it." Melissa didn't defend me, didn't object, didn't fall silent out of shock. She just sighed and said, "Well, so what? He has a house, he has money. We're just using a bit of it. No big deal." I sat frozen, not angry, not yelling, not crying, just empty. I saved the file and renamed it exhibitvideo1.move. I called Jonas right after watching it. After listening, his voice was firm. "Raymond, we moved to phase 2. You make me an evidence binder, American style. Print everything. We won't let them spin the story." I understood. In America, a physical binder is a legal weapon. I turned on the printer. Its steady hum filled the house. I printed 6 months of bank statements, The receipts they charged to the supplemental card, the utility bills proving they lived here full time, Melissa's money demand messages, all the photos from tonight, the journal pages I wrote, and especially the power of attorney they once used to corner me. I clipped them all into a black binder and labeled it in white ink. Holt Evidence, Private. The binder was heavier than I expected, just like the 4 years that had weighed on me without my noticing. Near midnight, I emailed Jonas 4 words. I have collected everything. He replied almost immediately, as if he had been waiting. Raymond, I saw the video. The day they returned from Iceland, we served the notice to vacate. 30 days to clear out. I looked at the binder on the table, at the house I once loved, at the place where Angela had placed each object with her own hands. And for the first time in 4 years, I felt the house breathing again, not with Travis yelling at a screen or Melissa slamming doors, but with the silence of a man taking back his life. I turned off the lights. The night was cold, but inside me something was warmer than it had been in years. The battle had officially begun. 3 days after the meeting at Tremont Cafe, I knew they would return. Iceland-Cleveland flights were limited, and Jonas checked the schedule and sent me a screenshot. Landing 10:42 a.m., Hopkins Airport. I did not go to the airport. I did not want to see them dragging suitcases and laughing as if abandoning me had been a harmless joke. I simply sat in the living room with no lights, no TV, no radio, just sitting there with the evidence binder in my lap like a verdict waiting to be read. At 11:26, I heard tires hitting the pavement outside, then car doors slamming, then the thump of suitcases on the steps. The front door swung open 3 seconds later. "Dad, we're home." Melissa's voice, cheerful, innocent, as if nothing had happened, as if Thanksgiving had never existed. Travis snickered. "See, I told you. Ray's not mad." I remained seated in the sunlight spilling through the window, my hands resting on the binder, the room silent. They stopped at the doorway, sensing the atmosphere was nothing like usual. Travis spoke first. Ray? Why are you sitting here in the dark?" I did not stand. I just lifted my eyes toward them. "Sit down." No yelling, no anger, but enough to make Travis freeze, as if someone had grabbed his throat. Melissa stepped forward, her face draining when she saw the black binder on my lap. Dad? Is something wrong?" I opened the binder, pulled out the first document, and placed it on the table between us. The notice to vacate, 30-day notice, valid under Ohio law, the exact template Jonas drafted. The M&T of their names under the word respondents seemed almost glowing in the silent room. "This I said, "is the ultimatum." Travis laughed, the laugh of someone who thinks he can always wiggle out. "You're joking, right? You can't kick your own kid out of their house." I tilted my head. "Check the deed." I slid the photocopy toward him. "This house is in your mother's and my name. Your mother is gone. Now it's only mine. Not a single line has ever belonged to you two." Travis grimaced, glanced down, and stuttered, This is fake. You think I'm stupid?" I didn't need to speak. Melissa had already seen the words sole owner from afar. She trembled, her lips opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. "Dad, you can't do this. I'm your daughter." Her voice cracked on the last word. I looked straight into her eyes. "You flew to Iceland to avoid me. You called me old man. You used my money to support Travis. You let him open my private mail. You let him turn the 3rd floor into a bunker. And you stood there, watching this house be taken." I placed my hand on the binder. "From now on, each of you has 30 days, not 1 minute more." Travis exploded, slamming his hand on the coffee table so hard the glass rattled. "You don't dare do this to your own daughter." I stood for the first time since they entered, my shadow stretching across the wooden floor to Travis's feet. I'm doing what a father must do. Protect what remains of this family from the ones destroying it. His face reddened. He stepped back. Melissa sobbed. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, trying to pull her into a stance of opposition. All right, honey, let me handle this. Ray wants to play legal? I'll sue. He's old. Just claim he's mentally unstable. I cut him off. Travis. My voice was so cold the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I spoke with Reddick. His face changed instantly. Jonas was a name anyone with legal trouble in this area knew and feared. He told me to cancel all supplemental cards. I looked right at him, and I did. Travis's breath hitched, his entire body stiffening as if shot. I continued. The power of attorney is revoked. Melissa's authorized account at the bank is void. Melissa broke into louder sobs. Travis erupted with unmasked rage. You crazy old man! You think you can get rid of us? Never! He slammed the table again, the crack echoing like a gunshot, knocking Angela's framed photo to the floor. I did not bend down to pick it up. I just stared at him. Never, I smirked. 30 days. Travis staggered, his face purple. Melissa tried to hold his arm, but he pushed her away, his shouting, her crying, the shaking furniture, the clatter of falling objects. All of it blended into a chaotic noise I had lived with far too long. But today was different. Today I held the rhythm. I stood straight and said only one line. Tomorrow, Reddick will send the notice to your attorney. Be prepared. I turned and walked toward my office, leaving 2 distorted faces on the wooden floor behind me. The house sank into silence, but this time silence was no longer loneliness. It was the beginning of order, and I knew from the moment the ultimatum was placed on the table, the battle was no longer theirs. The battle belonged to me. The next morning, Cleveland's sky was gloomy, the clouds hanging low like a layer of gray dust over the whole neighborhood. I arrived at Jonas's office at Public Square on time, the glass building reflecting the cold winter light and reminding me of the days I wore a black robe in court, days when I still believed people feared the law. The office door opened and Jonas stood by the coffee machine. Sit down, Raymond. I have something you need to see. His voice was not calm like usual, not angry, just restrained, the sound someone makes when something bad is about to be revealed. Jonas placed a thick stack of documents in a navy folder in front of me. The label read, Bank Statements, 24 months. Account, R. Holt. Transfers to M. Holt. The table felt colder under my hands. He opened the first page, tapping a pen against the transaction line. Raymond, you told me the power of attorney was only for emergencies in case you were unconscious in the hospital. I nodded. It was. Melissa gave me that stack of papers after my cardiac scope. I was tired. I trusted my daughter. Jonas slid a sheet toward me. This is the power of attorney you signed. Melissa used it to access your bank account for at least 24 months. I saw my name, my signature, the dates, all correct, except the purpose. Jonas flipped to a dense summary of numbers. Look at this. I leaned in. The line made my throat tighten. Total transfers, $62,000. Time span, 24 months. Frequency, 2 to 3 times a month. Each transfer, $1,200 to $2,400. None of them large enough to trigger suspicion. Each one sliced thin, spaced out. I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. Jonas explained slowly, these transfers are structured, repeated, clearly designed to avoid the bank's unusual activity flags. Melissa knew that, so she broke them into smaller pieces so no one would notice. I sank back into the leather chair. $62,000. It wasn't the amount that hurt. It was how she did it. Quiet, calculated, without asking, without telling me, and worst of all, without a trace of love. Maybe that was the part that broke something inside me. I closed my eyes. A memory drifted in, Angela sitting on the back steps, the afternoon sun lighting her hair gold. She once told me, Ray, people change when money enters the room. If you want to know someone's nature, give them power or give them opportunity. I laughed back then, telling her she was too cynical. Now, I understood. Late, but understood. Jonas straightened, his voice taking on the edge of a lawyer who had won the hardest cases. Raymond, this is financial exploitation under Ohio law. It is systematic and intentional. I asked, mostly to myself, what do I do? Jonas handed me 2 forms. First, a civil restitution claim, suing Melissa to return all $62,000. I flipped the paper. The claim amount line was blank. Jonas tapped his pen. We will write the exact number, not a single dollar less. And the second, Jonas slid the other form across. Second, you keep the right to file a criminal complaint, reporting elder financial theft. My hand shook slightly. That means prison? Prison is possible, Jonas said. I'm not saying you should file it. I'm saying you must keep the right. It's the only card that will make them afraid. I stared at the form. The printed ink looked sharp as a blade. Angela used to say, losing money isn't the worst. The worst is realizing the person who took it doesn't think they did anything wrong. I signed. No hesitation. Jonas checked the signature and nodded. Now sign the second. The affidavit of unauthorized transfers. This is your sworn statement declaring every transfer was done without your consent. I picked up the pen. The nib dragged across paper like slicing through an old wound. My name, the date, the final sworn line. When I placed the pen down, Jonas closed the file, wrapped it with an elastic band, and said in a low, verdict-like voice, Raymond, from this moment, we are no longer the weaker. Sighed. I looked out the window. Tiny snow flurries had begun to fall, light, thin, sharp as needles. $62,000. 2 years. A whole piece of my life. They thought I didn't know. They thought I would always be the gullible old man. But they forgot something I remembered this morning. I once stood on the side of the gavel, not the defendant's bench, and now I had evidence. I had the law, and I had the truth on my side. The financial war had officially shifted. 1 week after Jonas sent the notice to vacate, I received a thick envelope stamped by the Cuyahoga County Court. The mailman looked at me with a hesitant expression, as if he was delivering something no one would ever wish for, and I signed, carried the envelope into my study, my hand slightly shaking while my eyes stayed steady. The worst part was not what was inside. It was knowing exactly who had filed it. I opened it. 3 sheets fell onto the dark wooden desk, each one a precise, cold, poisonous stab. Travis and Melissa's names stood together on the petition. I read the first line. Emergency temporary guardianship request. I kept reading, every sentence a small blade. Mr. Raymond Holt, 63 years old, shows signs of diminished capacity, erratic behavior, unreasonable termination of financial support, distancing from family, increased self-isolation. I leaned back, exactly as Jonas predicted. They didn't just want to stay in my house. They wanted to claim me. They wanted the court to declare me temporarily incapacitated. So Melissa, using the POA, would gain full control of my assets and accounts. If the request was approved, I would lose the right to sign anything, to withdraw my own money, to decide anything about my home, and could even be placed in a care facility without the right to refuse, all with a single nod from a judge. I called Jonas. He answered before the second ring. I'm guessing I was right. I read the petition word for word. Jonas exhaled. Raymond, this is a classic dirty play. When they can't win on paper, they claim you're incompetent. But don't worry, we counter. Because it's an emergency filing, the court will review it within 48 hours. To keep them from gaining ground, we need a capacity evaluation before we walk into that courtroom. I asked, so the first step? Jonas replied, we hire a forensic psychiatrist, someone who specializes in capacity disputes. I know the right person. At 3 p.m, I had an appointment with Dr. Evelyn March, a woman who had testified as an expert in dozens of major Ohio cases. Her office sat in a red brick building near Lake Erie, quiet and scented with tea. She looked at me through thin wire glasses, her eyes sharp as X-rays. Mr. Holt, I've read the petition. We will conduct a full evaluation, not a social test. This is a forensic psychiatric assessment. 2 hours, no skipped steps. I nodded. The evaluation began. She started with simple questions. What day is today? Then moved to ones that even healthy people must think hard about. If you had $15,000 and needed to divide it across 8 months for living expenses, how would you allocate it and why? I answered clearly, calmly, without anger or bitterness, just truth. She tested short-term memory, long-term memory, logic, reasoning, situational judgment. She noted even small details like eye movement, tone, the way my fingers rested on the table. After exactly 2 hours, March set her pen down, closed the folder, and looked at me slightly longer than expected. Mr. Holt, I don't say this to many people. You are not only fully competent, you are sharper than most 63-year-olds I've evaluated. I'll prepare the report this evening. I exhaled, not out of relief, but because I knew this was only the first step in the fight. The next morning, Jonas and I appeared in Judge Caldwell's small courtroom, an interim hearing to review Travis's emergency guardianship request. Travis and Melissa were already seated, dressed sharply as if they were the victims. Travis looked at me with smug confidence, certain he had already won. Judge Caldwell entered, stern, neutral. Jonas stood first, placing a set of documents on the bench. Your Honor, we submit the forensic psychiatric evaluation by Dr. Evelyn March, state-certified expert. Caldwell opened it, flipped through, then stopped at the conclusion, reading aloud. Mr. Raymond Holt maintains full decision-making capacity. No evidence of cognitive decline, psychiatric disorder, or impaired judgment. Sharp for his age. I saw Melissa's shoulders fall. Travis's face flushed as if slapped. Caldwell looked straight at them. Do you have any evidence to contradict this? They stayed silent, avoided her gaze. She struck the gavel. The emergency temporary guardianship request is denied. The sound wasn't loud, but to me it felt like lightning in the room. Caldwell turned to me. Mr. Holt, not only are you competent, but the file shows you are organized, coherent, and managing a complex family situation appropriately. The court warns both petitioners not to abuse legal process. I stood taller. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't defending. I was standing firm. When we left the courtroom, Travis slammed his hand against the hallway wall, growling, You won this round, old man. I looked straight at him, no anger, no fear, and said one sentence. There are many rounds left, and this time, I'm not standing alone. Travis turned away. Melissa kept her head down. They left the courthouse like people who had just been exposed, and I knew their psychological ambush had failed. And from now on, every strike they threw would rebound onto them. 3 days after the interim hearing, Jonas sent me a PDF titled Revocation of Power of Attorney, the document that canceled every authority Melissa had. I signed it, had it notarized, and Jonas sent the original to the bank, the insurance company, and the credit union where I kept my retirement accounts. And within 6 hours, every supplementary account, every supplementary card, and every access Melissa had was shut down. Jonas said one emotionless but razor-sharp sentence. Raymond, I just cut their financial oxygen. And though I didn't feel the weight of that immediately, Cleveland certainly felt it for me after just one morning. Around 8:30, while I was making coffee, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from the bank, from the credit union, from the card system, and finally a message from Jonas. Get ready. The domino effect is about to start. I didn't understand until Harriet, my neighbor, called over the fence. Ray, have you checked the Tremont neighborhood Facebook? Some girl is causing a scene at the coffee shop on the corner. And when I opened my phone, the first thing I saw was a community post. Drama at Bitter Peaks Coffee. Young woman yelling because her dad cut her off. Whole shop watching. along with a 12-second video. Melissa, my daughter, standing at the counter, eyes wide, card in hand, her voice trembling with panic. No way. Try again, please. This card is my dad's, while the barista, a young woman with wine-colored hair, said softly but clearly, Sorry, declined for the third time. And Melissa forced a smile, the kind you make when your dignity is collapsing, saying, Maybe the system's down. Try Travis's card. Though I already knew the outcome, his card declined too. Someone at a nearby table said loudly enough for the microphone to catch, Looks like Papa cut the funding. And the shop let out small laughs. Not cruel laughs, just the kind people make when witnessing a tiny real-life tragedy. Melissa left with eyes red as fire. I did not feel joy. I did not want my child humiliated in public. But to be fair, it was the first time in 4 years she experienced what it meant to stand on her own, without leaning on my wallet. At the same hour, Travis was at the gym, something I knew from the automated email system tied to the supplementary card, and his decline emails hit like hail. LA Fitness, payment failed. Uber authorization declined. Spectrum Internet, payment rejected. Phone bill, card refused. And finally, the bank email. Supplementary card for M. Holt and T. Granger, access deactivated. For Travis, this wasn't just about losing money. It was about losing face. I could imagine him at the gym register, handing over the card, the machine scanning 3 times, all showing declined, people watching, staff watching, the entire lobby watching. A man who bragged nonstop that my father-in-law pays for everything, suddenly stripped of oxygen in public, and he couldn't handle it. I learned this when Melissa, in a panic, ran home and called him, and the neighbors heard every word. Cleveland's old houses have thin walls, and drama travels faster than Lake Erie winds. Close to noon, I got a call, not from Melissa, but from Harriet, her voice full of second-hand embarrassment. Ray, I'm not sure how to tell you this, but Travis is screaming in your front yard. And when I opened the door camera, there he was, standing in the middle of the yard, phone in hand, face red like he was about to explode, yelling into the screen, He wants war? Fine, I'll show him what a war looks like. Then smashing his phone on the steps, shards flying, before pointing at my door, as if it was something he planned to break down. Melissa stood beside him, hand over her face, glancing around because she knew neighbors were watching. I did not open the door. I stood behind the curtain, observing, and strangely enough, I did not shake, did not fear, did not worry. I only saw the rage of a man who had lost his lifeline, a man who realized that once the POA was revoked, once the cards were shut down, once he could no longer leech, his illusion of power evaporated. Jonas called. You saw it. This is only the beginning. Financial humiliation always exposes true nature, he said. I replied calmly. Jonas, I never thought I'd live to see my daughter standing in a coffee shop like that. And he answered gently but firmly. Raymond, you did nothing wrong. The wrong thing was them living off you for 4 years without once thinking about standing on their own feet. That afternoon, Melissa sent me 2 words, Dad talk. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to, but because for the first time in years, the balance of power had shifted, and for the first time, they would have to speak as equals, not as freeloaders with a sense of entitlement. Justice sometimes begins with a declined transaction, and I, Raymond Holt, will not apologize for taking back control of my own life. On the day of the consolidated hearing, Cleveland was so cold that Lake Erie looked as if it were covered by a thin sheet of steel, and I walked into the Cuyahoga County Court, wearing Angela's old coat, the lavender scent still lingering like a mental shield, and courtroom 4B was unusually crowded because people had come for the Cuy consolidated hearing, a type of merge proceeding covering 3 parts, reaffirming my mental competency, reviewing the eviction petition, and examining the financial exploitation records, meaning the entire truth of 4 years of living in hell, would be exposed in one single morning. When I entered, Melissa kept her head down, mascara smeared, hands trembling in her lap, while Travis leaned back with his legs spread, eyes full of rage as if ready to pounce. But I saw something different in them. No confidence, no defiance, no sense of, we control the old man, only panic. Judge Caldwell entered, the room rose, and though she was a short woman, her presence was like the wooden gavel in her hand, direct, cold, and uninterested in small talk. Court is in session. This is the consolidated hearing for the matters involving Raymond Holt versus Melissa Holt and Travis Granger, she said as Jonas stood calmly beside me like he was reading a morning newspaper, placing on the judge's bench 3 things: the evidence binder, the forensic report, and the 24-month bank statements, the documents I had spent almost an entire night gathering. Caldwell opened the binder, flipping through each page like she was reading the biography of a financial offender, then turned to Melissa. "Do you have legal representation?" Melissa shook her head, and Travis cut in. "We don't need a lawyer. We came here to—" But Caldwell raised her hand sharply. "Mr. Granger, another interruption, and I will issue your first warning." The hearing began with the competency file, my mental capacity. Jonas submitted the report from Dr. Evelyn March, and Caldwell read the conclusion out loud. Mr. Raymond Holt is completely lucid, logical, and shows no signs of memory impairment or judgment disorder. Sharp for his age, and though I did not look at Melissa, I heard her choke back a sound, while Travis folded his arms, face burning red. Caldwell tapped the gavel lightly. Competency is confirmed. We move to eviction. Travis shot up like a spring. Eviction what? We lived in that house for 4 years. We gave him friends, gave him family, cooked dinner, cleaned. And Jonas let out a small, mocking laugh that nearly pushed Travis into madness. Caldwell slammed the gavel harder. "One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." And he sank back, eyes blazing. Jonas stated clearly, no lease, no rent, no legal right of residence. "They are guests, Your Honor, and guests may be asked to leave within 30 days. And Caldwell nodded immediately. "Eviction is granted. Notice to vacate stands. They have 30 days to leave the property." And I heard Melissa let out a soft cry, like the sound of a glass breaking, not from remorse, but from losing privilege. But the cruel part had yet to come. Caldwell opened the bank statements Jonas submitted, and the first line that hit her eyes: $62,000 in transfers to Melissa Holt. Each transaction, $1,200, $1,600, $2,400, laying out an undeniable map of wrongdoing. Caldwell turned the file toward Melissa. "How do you explain these amounts?" Melissa trembled. I was only helping Dad manage the account," he agreed. But Jonas stood, voice sharp as a blade. "Your Honor, there is no message indicating any consent from Mr. Holt, and every transfer is under $2,500, the threshold that avoids bank alerts. This is not management, this is structured exploitation." Caldwell stared at Melissa so long the room felt like it had been drained of oxygen, then delivered the sentence that made Melissa collapse into her chair. "You owe this court all 24 months of financial records within 14 days. Failure to comply will be treated as intentional concealment." Travis shot up, slamming his fist on the table. "He's lying. We gave him friends, gave him family. Without us, he would have—" And Caldwell roared, "Mr. Granger, sit down. One more word, and I will hold you in contempt, and have you escorted out in handcuffs." And the room froze as Travis looked around, then sat like a child caught stealing. Finally, Caldwell issued her ruling. The court finds: 1. Mr. Holt is fully competent. 2. The notice to vacate is valid and effective for 30 days. 3. Ms. Melissa Holt must submit all financial documentation within 14 days. 4. The file is transferred to the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office for review of potential financial exploitation under Ohio law, meaning the matter was no longer civil. It was being moved to criminal investigation. Melissa cried silently. Travis glared at me with murderous eyes, and I simply looked back, not with victory, but with the quiet recognition that the truth had finally been lit up in front of everyone. That was the peak of public humiliation, the first peak of this story, and also the first time I saw them understand that I was never weak. I had simply endured for too long. That night after the hearing, I returned home in silence as the snow began falling thicker, settling on the porch roof like a blank sheet of unwritten paper, and I stepped inside without turning on the lights, the house hearing every click of the door, every footstep on the floor, as if it too were waiting to witness the downfall of the people who had tormented it for 4 years. And Melissa and Travis came home about 10 minutes after me, unaware that I stood in the dark hallway, and I heard the door slam hard enough to rattle the glass frame before Travis growled, "Whose fault was that damn hearing, huh? Who signed those stupid POA papers?" And Melissa answered with no strength left, "Dad was sick then, and you benefited from it all. Don't blame me." And Travis hit the wall, shouting, "If you controlled him better, none of this would have happened. You're his daughter. How could you let him flip the script on us in court?" And Melissa burst into tears, her sobs choking like someone trying just to get air. "You only used my dad for 4 years. You never loved me." And that sentence shot through the house like a stray bullet, shocking even her. And Travis froze before roaring, "Used him? Without me, how would you survive on your tiny salary? If your dad has money, why not use it? That old man doesn't even know how to spend it." And I heard things being kicked over, frames falling, and the two of them clawing at each other with the kind of cruel words people only use when they've emptied out all decency. "Why did you call my dad useless?" "Because he is. He's old and easy to control." "Shut up." "No, listen. Did you think I stayed in this house because of you?" I stood at the staircase landing, half hidden in the dark. For 4 years I had heard their laughter, their slammed doors, their voices treating me like a walking wallet, but never had their fights sounded this clear and vicious, and never had I heard Melissa defend me. Late, confused by fear and anger, but still a defense. The neighbors heard everything through the thin Tremont walls. Harriet turned on her porch light. Mr. Cameron's house across the street lit up, and people began gathering near the sidewalk, whispering, because no one needed to say it out loud. My daughter and son-in-law were revealing their true selves, not in court, not through emails, but right in the middle of our neighborhood, in front of the houses that had known years of quiet. Finally, I stepped out of the darkness, not yelling, not raising my voice, just enough for them to go silent, like someone had flipped a switch. "You two," I said, my voice so calm it surprised even me, "are destroying your own lives." Melissa turned, eyes red, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and Travis stared with his jaw locked tight. I continued, each word dropping like stone. "I didn't do this. The court didn't do this. You did. Every dollar you took, every word you said, every action you chose." The house was so quiet I could hear the wind whistle through the doorframe, and Travis opened his mouth, but no sound came out, while Melissa bowed her head, gripping her coat like she was trying to hold on to anything still left. But nothing was left. No one to blame, no place to push responsibility, no financial lifeline to cling to. They stood there, one furious to the point of despair, one humiliated to the point of collapse. And for the first time in 4 years, they were silent, not because they feared me, but because they finally realized that the collapse they were facing was not mine, but entirely their own, in the dark, right in front of me, and in front of a community that once believed they were the dutiful children caring for an old father. 1 week after the night of the argument, I received an envelope stamped in red from the Cuyahoga County District Attorney's Office. Not an ordinary notice, but the kind that makes anyone who has ever committed financial exploitation feel their spine freeze. And Jonas called me before I even tore it open, saying, "Raymond, I already received the copy. Brace yourself." And when I opened it, the first line was a blunt warning. DA's office is considering criminal charges for financial exploitation of an elderly individual, with the bolded section below stating, Melissa Holt may avoid prosecution if she agrees to repay the full $62,000 within the required time frame. And I reread it not because of the money, but because of what it meant. Melissa was no longer standing in a gray zone. She was standing on the border between freedom and a criminal record. Around 3 in the afternoon, Jonas arrived at my house with a thick black briefcase, and less than 10 minutes later, Travis and Melissa walked into the living room, their faces stretched tight as strings, Travis strutting in front with his chest puffed out, like this was the last battle of his life, and Melissa behind him with dark circles under her eyes like someone who had not slept for many nights. Jonas opened the file, placed the DA's letter on the table, and turned it toward them, saying without any detour, "You two should read carefully." Melissa's hand shook as she read, while Travis skimmed a few lines before tossing the paper onto the table, snapping, "They're bluffing! They have no proof we exploited anything." And Jonas responded with a steel-cold voice, "We have 24 months of statements, camera footage, POA misuse, and a forensic evaluation proving Mr. Holt is fully competent. The DA is not bluffing. The DA is preparing to prosecute." Travis let out a mocking laugh, the kind people use when trying to swallow panic. "We're not paying a cent. Let's see if the court dares to jail us." And Melissa turned to him, her face going pale. "Travis, what are you saying? This is the DA. This isn't a civil hearing anymore." And Jonas interjected, presenting the agreement. "Here's the solution. I spoke with the district attorney's office. They will consider not prosecuting if Melissa signs a civil restitution agreement, $62,000 paid over 3 years, with Mr. Holt not objecting." I looked at Melissa, and for the first time in many months I saw not anger in her eyes, but real fear, while Travis, like a trapped animal, roared, "No! Absolutely not! Don't sign! They're manipulating you!" And Melissa turned to him, her voice shattering like glass. "Shut up!" freezing Travis where he stood, and she didn't stop, looking at him, and for the first time in 4 years saying exactly what needed to be said. "You just want to gamble with my future. You're not the one the DA is targeting. I'm the one being charged. It's my name on these papers." And Travis threw his hands up. "So what? This old man deserves—" But Melissa cut him off, her voice broken yet clear. "This is my father's money, not yours." That sentence turned like a key, unlocking a part of Melissa I thought had died during 4 years beside Travis, and Travis's face turned red, as if the blood had surged up his throat. "You're betraying me?" And Melissa stepped back half a step, for the first time not avoiding his gaze. "No, I'm just not betraying my father anymore." Jonas slid the agreement toward her. "Ms. Holt, choose." Melissa looked at the paper, at the bold words, restitution agreement, then looked at me, and I said nothing, not encouraging, not signaling, just standing there letting my child decide her own life. The pen touched the paper, very slowly, very shakily, but decisively, and Melissa signed, a signature not pretty or straight, but the first one she had ever made without deceit. Travis slammed his hand on the table. "Melissa, you're insane!" But Melissa no longer looked at him. She simply said one sentence that dropped the room into silence. "I don't want to be known as the person who stole from my own father." Jonas nodded, gathering the documents, his voice low and firm. "From this moment, the civil matter is resolved, and the criminal prosecution will be halted, if you follow the schedule." I looked at Melissa, not forgiving, not condemning, just looking, and for the first time I saw in her eyes no recklessness, no dependency, no Travis, only a woman facing the consequences of her own actions and choosing the right path, even if late. The restitution negotiation was over, but its aftershocks were only beginning. The moving day came faster than I expected, and the Cleveland morning was foggy, the sky gray like an old sheet of paper someone had crumpled, then smoothed out again, and I stood on the porch watching the white moving truck back up against the curb, while the movers opened the rear door and pulled the tarp down with a cold metallic screech. And after 4 years of this house being occupied, it was finally time for it to breathe again. The second floor door opened, and Travis came down first with a black suitcase, not looking at me or anyone, only at the ground as if the entire world was betraying him. And when he walked past me, he slammed his shoulder into mine as if challenging me, growling, "You will die alone." And it wasn't the first time I'd heard him say that, but this time the words fell onto the porch like a heavy stone and shattered instantly because another voice rose behind him, soft but sharper than any blade. "No, Dad will live right." Melissa said it, her voice not loud but heard by everyone, and neighbor Harriet lifted her head in her yard, and Mr. Cameron opened his curtain, and Travis froze like someone had yanked a brake on him, turning back with twitching eyes in shock. Melissa stood at the top of the steps, with her arms held close to her stomach, her eyes no longer shaking, no longer dependent, no longer the person he had controlled for 4 years. He threw me one last look, the look of someone who knew he had lost the house, lost the money source, and now lost the woman he thought would cling to him forever. And then he turned sharply, dragged the suitcase, and walked away, the wheels grinding across the brick patio like the closing sound of a filthy chapter that ended not by the court, not by me, but by Melissa herself, the one he thought would always be on my side. The house fell silent after he left, and I went back inside. Melissa was gathering the last of her things, a box of books, an old sweater, a few papers. There were no items of Travis left, none of the things that had felt like thorns in my eyes for years, and even the master bathroom, where Angela used to stand brushing her hair, no longer had Melissa's scattered cosmetics. For the first time in years, I felt the house inhale a long, deep, clear breath. I walked into the living room where Melissa was trying to close a carton box, struggling because the flaps wouldn't align. I approached and said softly, "Let me," and her hands slowly released as I folded the flaps and taped them down, and she stood still, watching me like she was looking at someone she had forgotten for 4 years, her eyes red, no mascara smudged, no anger, only exhaustion and regret. When we carried the box out to the porch, she paused, looking at the truck, at the porch, at me, and a long second passed before she said, her voice small but steady, "I'm sorry." Just 2 words that sounded like the lock releasing from something stuck in my chest for 4 years. Melissa looked straight at me and said, "I will pay everything back, every dollar, every bit." I nodded without speaking, not because I wasn't ready to forgive, but because I understood this apology wasn't for completion. It was the opening line of a long journey she would have to walk herself. Melissa stepped toward me slowly, her hands slightly trembling, and when she stood in front of me, the entire porch seemed to hold its breath. And then she said, her voice breaking like a child who had forgotten the way home, "Dad, can I hug you?" I didn't think. I opened my arms, and for the first time in many years, my daughter hugged me. A real hug, not a polite one, not a hug to ask for money, not a hug to hide guilt, but the hug of a child who had walked too far into darkness and finally returned searching for a bit of family light. I placed my hand on her back, and her shoulders shook, but not from fear anymore, this time from relief. Outside, Harriet smiled gently and went back inside like someone witnessing the return of something everyone thought was lost, and the wind from Lake Erie swept across the yard, cold but comforting, and I felt an old layer of dust inside me, the dust of 4 years of hurt, begin to fall away. Melissa released me, wiped her eyes, then stepped down the stairs, saying, "I will try, so you can trust me again." I answered with only one sentence, soft as breath. "I'm still here." The truck's tarp closed, the engine started, and Melissa looked at the house one last time before the truck pulled away, while I stood there on the porch that had held more pain than any house should. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing alone. 1 month after Melissa moved out, the house on Jefferson Street returned to a state I had long forgotten. Peaceful, with no shouting from Travis, no slamming doors, no angry footsteps across the wooden floor, only the crackle of the fireplace when the temperature dropped below zero, and the sound of the wind from Lake Erie passing through the 3rd floor where Angela used to sit, reading every winter afternoon. And one morning, while I was sweeping a thin layer of snow on the porch, Marilyn, the widowed woman living 3 houses down, walked over with her red wool scarf and a box of ginger cookies, and I had grown familiar with seeing her from afar, her small frame, her gentle smile, and her bright eyes whenever she looked at someone for a long moment. And she had brought me pumpkin bread on Thanksgiving night, the night I received that old man message, and she asked, "Ray, it's cold out. Would you like a cup of hot chocolate?" And I felt slightly surprised by her simple directness, but strangely comforted. We stood on the porch looking at the fog-covered street, and for the first time in many years, I did not feel like a lonely man in a house too large. That afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from Melissa. Not long, not an explanation, not a plea, just a photo of a small apartment, lit by warm yellow lights, with olive-colored walls, and on the table the last cardboard box she was unpacking, with a short caption underneath. "I finished moving. I can start again now, Dad." And I touched the screen for a long moment, not to grieve, but to be grateful that she was finally keeping her promise. "I will live right." And I replied with only one message. "I am proud, not full forgiveness, but the beginning of peace for both of us." That Christmas, Marilyn invited me over for dinner, and I brought a bottle of wine Angela used to love, even though I knew no one would drink it for her. But carrying a piece of her with me made me feel steadier. The dining table was small and warm, neatly set with roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and baked apple pie, with the scent of cinnamon and orange peel filling the room. And we talked about the neighbor repairing his fence, about how the first snow arrived earlier that year, and about Marilyn learning pottery. And there were no painful topics, no shadows of the past slipping in, only 2 people who had lost too much finding a gentler way to live beside each other. When I returned home, the sky was dark, snow falling thick but not harsh, and the warm yellow light from the living room stretched across the windows like a layer of honey in the cold winter. And I sat at my table and opened the journal I had written in for months, the pen resting in my hand for a long while before I wrote the final line. Justice isn't loud. It's a cold winter that finally feels warm, because justice is not an explosion, and not the moment someone collapses before me. It is simply a cold, faded winter that finally feels warm. I closed the journal and stepped out onto the porch, the house quiet as if asleep, and in the distance the streetlights reflected on the snow, creating a soft glow that looked strangely beautiful. And I stood there for a long time with my hand on the wooden railing Angela and I once painted together. With no Melissa, no Travis, no arguments, and no long, exhausting nights. Only me, the falling snow, and the warm yellow light on the steps. The light I had been searching for through 4 long years, and at last, I found it. And so we have reached the end of this 12-part journey, a long winter of betrayal, closed doors, and the yellow lights finally turning on. And if you are still here, it means you walked with me through the nights my house was occupied, through the shouting behind the walls, through the courtroom where the truth finally stood upright and all the way to the moment I looked at the snow and no longer felt cold. I did not tell this story for revenge. I told it to remind someone reading that sometimes justice does not arrive with noise. It comes slow, cold, quiet, but when it touches you, it warms your whole life. Thank you, truly, for spending your time listening to the story of an old man who once thought he had nothing left but darkness. And your presence makes the last page of this journal much lighter. If the story touched you, leave a dot so I know you still believe in the truth. Comment the city you live in so I can see where the light of justice reaches. And if you want to hear more true stories about family, betrayal, and how people find themselves again, follow the channel. Every week I will sit down, lift my pen, and tell you another story. A story of gratitude, awakening, and justice. Thank you, and I wish you a winter cold enough to remind you that you are alive and warm enough to remind you that you never walk alone.